Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to call this Special Arts, Parks, and LA River Committee to order. And before we start the order of business, we have one person who has filled out several public comment cards. We're going to give you 4 minutes, Mr. Spindler, to make your comments. So please step forward and let's set the clock if Mr. Spindler's in the room. Maybe he's not in the room.
Oh, here he is.
All together?
All together.
Isn't that nice? Well, what we have here, it's all the usual. The potential Los Angeles River floodplain revisions. So, as you know, it's been raining real hard right now. The El Nino is here. And, the water's so high, you can't even step out of your driveways right now because it's raining so hard and it's so cold. So, these usual panic attacks that happen here in the city of Los Angeles are absolutely for naught. Then we have this is a good one, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We're going to restore the Los Angeles River. Really? We're going to restore the Los Angeles River. For what? You got concrete in there, and the reason they put the concrete in there in the first place is because the city one time completely flooded and nearly destroyed itself, so you needed a chamber to get rid of the water in extreme flooding. But you're going to take all the concrete out with your $1 billion of federal wasted tax money and turn it into ground, and then maybe 20 years later you just have to re-gunite it again. But that's okay. That's what all of this is on the schedule. It's called creative destruction. So you create economic opportunity by destroying something and rebuilding it. Because we don't build anything, we just have to take down something and rebuild it. That's how you make all the money on all of these little boondoggles. Arts development fee programs on number 7. Absolute garbage, we don't need it. And then we have we're going to protect the wildlife on number 8. So, what wildlife? I mean, we're going to, they're going to be redeveloping parts of Griffith Park, which is our largest park, which is probably the only wildlife it has. And that's a good segue into item 3, because now we're dealing with the zoo director of the Los Angeles Zoo Business and Marketing Plan. You have the second largest city in America, and it can't make money on the only zoo in the city. And yet you go down to San Diego, and the San Diego Zoo seems to make money. They seem to know how to do it. How about take and rent one of those Priuses and drive down to San Diego, spend a week down there, buy some cotton candy and walk around and see how a real zoo is operated. And maybe you'll learn that maybe the way you do things is when somebody does something successful, you should follow the game plan instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, for example, in the zoo, when you had the elephant, and the poor elephant died. Remember that? That poor old elephant, he just sat there and choked to death and just rolled over and dropped dead in the zoo, and all the kids ran out and went, "Mommy, they're killing animals!" So Los Angeles Zoo is just a killer park. It's an absolute antiquated piece of garbage. It's next to a golf course. I mean, you hit your 9-iron over there in Harding and Wilson golf courses, and you hit a baboon if you hook a tee shot off the 10th tee. It's just disgusting the way that all of this is built around itself. We have so many great resources in this city, so many ways that we could make this the best city in the world, but because of the 15 mafia crime family districts that are run the way it's run, we just go in circles and in circles and in circles, and we defeat any good that can come out of anything. And that's why we're economically depraved.
Okay, again, welcome everyone to the Special Arts, Parks, and LA River Committee, joined by my colleagues Curran Price and Bob Blumenfield. And I am going to ask for some consent items, but we do have a speaker card on 8 as well. Mr. William Preston Bowling, please step forward.
Good morning. I'm William Preston Bowling. I'm Special Projects Manager at Friends of the Los Angeles River. And on November 12th, the Atwater Village Neighborhood Council sent this committee some letters regarding wildlife protection corridor in Atwater Village. And I have these letters here, if I could pass them out to you guys. On August 19, 2005, the City of Los Angeles, Michael Fuhrer, City Attorney, drafted some amendments to the municipal code about protecting wildlife in the Sepulveda Basin because there's been people taking eggs and actual fowl to cook them, and then actually there's been some drone incidents over there. And with the recreation in the LA River, we've seen a lot of the wildlife in the recreation zone move a little bit north into Atwater Village. And there's an area from Los Feliz Bridge south into Fletcher that is being mapped by the Nature Conservancy as wildlife. And the Atwater Village Neighborhood Council in Fuller would like to see that area as a wildlife protection corridor. There's only 2 wildlife protection reserves in the city of Los Angeles. We have the Sepulveda Basin and then the bird sanctuary in Griffith Park, which is the water features are destroyed, and the only birds that remain there are pretty much a couple of woodpeckers that have taken over the trees in there. And all of the waterfowl have migrated over the hill into the Los Angeles River because we're putting 30 million gallons of water a day into this area. So we're seeing a lot of the birds staying in this area, and then the migrating Canadian geese, they still think it's summer right now, and they're staying there year-round. And since Fuller is advocating for recreation in the recreation zones, we've noticed some wildlife injuries occurring with fishing lines. So we established a fishing line recycling program, and we wanted to educate the anglers the dangers of wildlife injury, and then we wanted to restore this one area so we can have an area that is great for the birds and bird watching for years to come, that the recreation isn't going to interfere. And even Walt Young from MRCA.
You could wrap up, yeah.
Yeah, Walt Young from MRCA said that that area is not good for recreation because of the concrete lip under Los Feliz Bridge. It would be not good for kayaking. So,
Okay. So
please read the letter, and I would like to work with David Brew and Mitchell Farrell in a
Great.
committee.
Okay. Yeah. So, no, I appreciate it. And Mr. Bowling, if you could, I was happy to help with that fishing line
Yes,
project
thank
and
you.
help fund that. If you could, if you haven't yet already, just chatted with my policy director, Christine Peters.
Okay.
That would be terrific. And,
All right,
and
thank you
we'll,
very much.
we'll follow up on this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we are joined by our colleague David Rue. And colleagues, what I'd like to do is take items 3, 6, 7, and 8 on consent if there are no objections. 3, 6, 7, and 8. All right, seeing as there are no objections, that brings us to item 1. Mr. Sutton-Willis, could you please read item 1?
Number 1 is a discussion item. The Bureau of Engineering, with the assistance of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to provide an update relative to the potential Los Angeles River floodplains revisions.
Thank you so much. And we are joined by Ed DeMessa, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and from the LA River Works, Dr. Carol Armstrong and Michael Effelt. And please begin.
Thank you very much,
Yep.
Mr. Chair and council members. Again, I'm Mike Affelt from the LA Riverworks team with our director, Carol Armstrong, and Ed DeMesa, the Chief of Planning of the LA District Army Corps of Engineers. So just a brief intro, then I'll turn it over to Ed to discuss. The LA River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, also known as the ARBOR study, in its hydraulic and hydrology analysis indicated that the on-record floodplain maps for the 100-year or 1% annual chance exceedance storm events are in need of update. The analysis level is in the study is not detailed enough to make those revisions. Therefore, the Army Corps is pursuing those revisions at a higher level of analysis. That's just a brief intro, and I'll turn over to Ed to go into some of the details.
Thank you, Mike. Chair, council members, good morning. So in early September, we completed the initial study of the Arbor Reach using a one-dimensional model. It did not provide the level of resolution that we need to be able to delineate the area on a parcel-by-parcel basis so that it will be useful for an update of the FEMA floodplain map. At the request of the city, the Corps asked for additional funding from our higher headquarters so that we could revisit our analysis and apply a more detailed, a higher resolution model for a two-dimensional floodplain. We were able to receive initial funding last month, and we have started on that effort. Currently, the Corps is in a continuing resolution appropriations, and we are only given some amount of funding. We have requested for the entire amount that is needed to complete, and if that is provided, it will take us about a couple of months to finish. But being in a continuing resolution, it will probably be on a month-by-month basis. We hope to get all the funding in the next couple of months, 3 months at the most, and sometime in March, we will have a draft results for us to present to you again, and a final sometime in April.
Okay. Anything to add, Dr. Armstrong? No? So I have some concerns about this because the initial draft report was released October 2nd, the draft floodplain map of 2014, and it has almost 2,000 properties in the 13th district in the draft report that are now included in this, I'll use the term again, draft, not to scare anyone, but floodplain zone, which is a revised, and it was kind of buried in the initial report that came out. We daylighted it, and we were hoping to have a community meeting almost a year ago so that constituents could air their concerns, have their questions answered. And it doesn't just affect the 13th; it's all along the river. It has places in the valley, et cetera. And I'm concerned because March El Nino, if we have an El Nino, is pretty much going to be drawing to a close. So the timing isn't so great, especially if this is going to be, if we're going to have an intense 2 or 3 months. So that concerns me. So what I suppose we have to work with your timeline in terms of the funding that you get. But the information is out there already, and people are increasingly a little concerned about why their properties are included in this new draft floodplain map.
Yes, sir. So
could you address your initial thoughts
that a little bit.
Yeah, as far as the severity and why so many properties were included in this revised map, and what was the rationale for that?
So, sir, the existing mapping that the city has been relying on, it's actually information that came from a study by the Corps of Engineers in 1986 that resulted in the improvements of LA River for the downstream area. During that study, we did not find federal justification, economic justification to improve the reaches that is in question right now. The information that is out in the public is dated. It does not reflect the existing conditions that we have out there. So the study that we're conducting right now will actually provide the level of detail, the resolution that FEMA will accept, and the city will be able to use that to update the floodplain map. Again, it's an outdated information. The reason why we're doing this new analysis is because we are not able to stand behind the information that's available currently.
And is it accurate to say that there's about a $60,000 short fund? Is that?
We requested $60,000. We have been provided 10 or 12,000, and we are scheduled to receive additional funding for December, It is the remainder of the funds that we need to complete by April is what we're asking for.
But it sounds like you're not really committing to being able to deliver the final floodplain map in March or April. It sounds like you're trying to because you're trying to have the funding cascade in to pay for it, but it doesn't sound like you're ready to commit that it will actually be finalized.
So it's really the funding. I mean, if we receive the funds today, we will probably be able to deliver in about a month and a half or two at the most.
It's just curious to me why this isn't a priority with the Army Corps of Engineers.
It is absolutely a priority for us. As we speak, we actually have folks out in the field right now that's doing some surveys so that we could identify the areas that's in most need of our attention preparatory to El Nino so that we could ask for additional O&M funds to address those pinch points. But under continuing resolution, we are only allowed by Congress to execute the same level of funding as we have done the year before. So we could not ask for the entire $60,000 all at once.
And the reason this is so important is we have so much focus on the river and establishing permanent revenue streams for the big goals we have for the river, whether it's enhanced increment financing, which we have our consultant underway now, or whether it's alternative 20. And what I hate the thought of is there's a perception of uncertainty because of this draft floodplain map when we're moving forward with all these initiatives that include taking a look at hydrology and all these other things. You see kind of a conflict there in terms of the
Absolutely
uncertainty.
appreciate that. Yes, sir. So I could commit that when the initial results are available, we would be happy to come back and present that to the committee.
And to the RiverWorks team, is there a way that you could partner with Army Corps by tapping into the special river fund that exists? I know it's small, but have you all had those discussions in terms of, since there's a sense of urgency here?
We have not as of yet had specific discussions about contributing to that effort, but if that was a direction of the council, I'm sure that would be possible.
I would love to just psychologically just get the final map done, put it to the side, have the community meeting, have those questions answered, because I think it'll clear the air. I mean, it's certainly going to raise questions, but it'll also demonstrate that we're being direct about this, that we're dealing with it, that it's what it is, and I think it'll be helpful in the overall efforts along the river.
Right. I just want to step in for a minute.
Sure.
Councilman, in the past, there has been outside funds given to an Army Corps project, and particularly FOLAR gave $970,000 to the Army Corps study as contributed funds. And it's my understanding, and Ed, please back me up on this, that it takes you forever to accept the funds if we try to do that, and time is of the essence here, so it would push us beyond almost the time that we need to get this floodplain done for you to accept contributed funds from the city, correct?
Yes, I will disagree with forever, but I will not argue that it's going to take a very long time. But, sir, the city actually offered the Corps of Engineers some funding for the floodplain. Because of the authority that we're using to conduct this study, it would require a cost-sharing agreement to be in place before we could even start the study. Mm-hmm. And that would probably set us back at least half a year. So we actually move forward with the study using Corps-only funds. We completed the first part. We needed more resolution. We asked for additional funding instead of stepping back and actually asking for matching funds, because it would put us back quite a bit just to get an agreement in place. So I think the plan that we have right now, although not quick enough, I think it is the most expeditious way, because we are able to make use of available funding under that program with the Corps of Engineers.
Okay. And you would be willing to report back every 30 days on progress? Would you be willing to commit to that?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, that'd be great. My concern is that things like this, very necessary, not knocking the fact that we're revising the floodplain map, but my concern is that it can foster a sense of doubt. And that this would be the worst possible time for that, especially as we're, so focused and bringing the real resources for the first time ever to making all these wonderful things happen at the river. So I think I've beat that dead horse now. So I'd like to open up to my colleagues. Mr. Blumenfield.
And just following along on the money side of it, and then some generic questions. The congressional resolution authority ends on Friday of next week, December 11th, right?
Yes.
So
That'll be this week.
right. So it's going to be either another CR, or they're going to actually appropriate the money at that point. So we could, if the gods were shining on us and there's some cooperation, actually have this. If the appropriation is made on Friday or next week, can we move forward with the project right away?
So if Friday's action is an extension of the continuing resolution, then we will be eligible to request the same amount of funding that we have received the month before. Yes. So it'll be a fraction.
Which would take 5 months to do it at that rate.
We're hoping that we won't have to wait that long for Congress to pass a resolution, but that is the likely worst scenario.
But if it's just if it's a whole year-long CR and there's never actually another appropriation passed,
Yes.
then we're stuck on a 5-month time at best.
Yeah. So what's working for us is that we have executed what they gave us last month, and there's some amount that's already appropriated for that. So the subsequent month we will be eligible for the amount that we have already executed, which will double our capability. So by January timeframe, we'll eligible for at least $20,000. That will get us really close to the end.
Yeah, and the other thing we can think about, we can try to ask for our D.C. representatives to, because all it would take is a Congress member, senator, to add in a little language to the CR to allow us to use those funds, absent a new appropriation that could make this happen as well. So I think as part of our recommendation, whatever, we at least take that step to activate our D.C. lobbyists to look into just inserting a little bit of language into the CR if there is another CR next week. And that means we'd have to act quickly this week to get someone. We might actually have to make some phone calls rather than do it this way.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I think we should. I'm certainly willing to. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's certainly a possibility. I wanted to understand the need for the study, too. It just as you were talking about one-dimensional versus two-dimensional. And could you help me understand what
Yes, sir.
first study, what does that mean? Are we...
So the initial study that we did was simply looking at the cross-section of the river. If you could imagine standing in the middle of the river, and if the water is overflowing, and the water is flat throughout the entire watershed, it is going to expand as far as the water could go. And the end of that expansion will be the floodplain. Everything inside that would be underwater.
So an inch trough would be measured the same as a 2-foot trough?
The resolution would be within inches. So what came out of the initial analysis was that we could use just the water surface elevation, but it did not give us the resolution on the outer edges on exactly what parcels and properties are either within the water surface elevation or not. So it did not give us the number of parcels that's actually flooded. What we're using right now is actually a state-of-the-art mapping that the city provided. And we're using the topographic mapping together with our 2D model to have that higher resolution on the outer edges to be able to pinpoint
So with
whether a
GIS,
building is...
How is this different than the usual GIS mapping?
The mapping that was given to us by the city is actually looks at the cross section of the river. It looks at it has the elevation of the properties,
Right.
and even the building. It has the elevation of the first floor elevation of the buildings. So it has the information that we otherwise will not have if we were doing a typical floodplain study, because producing that sort of mapping would have costed our floodplain study
So we're not trying to recreate, because that was what I was getting at, is I thought we had, and I would ask Carol that, I thought the city had done extensive mapping already.
And that's the mapping that we're actually using. All we're doing is we're putting the water over that mapping, and we're identifying what properties are.
So there's no mapping that needs to be done.
No, no, sir.
All you're doing is just taking one database of water and matching it with another database of our
Of your-
GIS map.
Yes. Essentially, I mean, it would not do justice to the engineers that's doing it, but that's as simple as it
I'm
is.
sure it's much more complicated.
Yes.
It's got to be at
Yes.
least $60,000 more complicated than that. But but
they'd appreciate that.
it does confuse me why we can't do it with quicker. Why even? I mean, could the city do this and hand it to them? I'll ask our city folk. I mean, and then have them validate it.
I don't know if I have the answer to the question whether the city could do it. It's the models are U.S. Army Corps of Engineers models, and the experts in their hydraulics and hydrology branch at the LA district are the ones who perform this analysis, these types of analyses regularly on the river. I would fear that we would run into a similar setback in terms of becoming of a familiarization issue, rather than letting the experts at the Corps do their work.
So it's not just a technical problem of they have to do it, we have to do it. There's an expertise involved that we don't have, that we need to make that happen. Is that everybody's understanding?
Again, I'm going to step in here. I think that fundamentally the city doesn't have jurisdiction over flood management, and the Army Corps does. So there's a chain of expertise in the Army Corps. We found that every time we try to do things like that, there's a sign-off, a vertical chain of command where there's a technical sign-off by those personnel, and for someone else to do the work and for them to do the QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control is what's timely, what takes the time.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I mean, we have a lot of the information that's going to be needed. If we had hired a contractor to do it, we would end up having to provide them the information that's available for us, not for them to do the work. Yeah, so I think this is, we're definitely going the right route. We just couldn't promise you that funds are going to be available, because that's definitely outside what we could promise here today.
You do it in-house, you don't contract it out.
We're doing this work in-house, yes. It's being done, it's being developed by the same individuals that's been involved with the LA River restoration. We're using that efficiency to the maximum.
All right. Thank you. Colleagues? Yep. Mr. Price?
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Question, I know this is, the study's been going on for several years, and it suggested that there still are a few more phases, obviously, until it gets completed. Any idea when the completion date's going to occur? How far out? Are it 3 years, 4 years, 10 years?
Yes, sir. Yeah, if we're referring to the ecosystem restoration feasibility study, the upcoming milestones, by the end of this year is when we expect the chief's report, the Chief of Engineers report, which makes the project recommendation to the Assistant Secretary of the Army. That's expected to be done by the end of the year. Following that, coinciding with local consideration and adoption process, the chief's report would be sent to the Office of Management and Budget in the presidential administration for its review, and moving that all forward to May 2016 is when we could expect that the record of decision would be signed by the Assistant Secretary of the Army after those reviews have been completed, and that would really mark the end of the feasibility phase. And at that point, the study could move from feasibility into its implementation phase.
Thank you.
All right. With that, no further. This was a discussion item only, so I appreciate your willingness to come back in 30 days and just report back on this. I can't overstate enough what a priority it is, so appreciate it. All right, and that brings us to item 2, and I think you all are going to stay for item 2.
Item number 2, BOE report relative to the accounting and status of the progress of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, council members. We are clearly at an exciting time for the Los Angeles River in considering these weighty matters and others. And Finally coming to the end of the feasibility phase of the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, in which the Corps and the city are partners. So this study, to catch up a little bit, began in 2006, is recommending measures to restore 719 acres of ecosystem in the river and adjacent to the river, and it's nearly complete. The final feasibility report was circulated in October for its state and agency review, which is also a public review. The Corps received over 800 comments and is completing responses this week to the 30 or so which warrant a written response back. The Chief's report, which I just mentioned, is actually already in circulation at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters. And as I said, we'll expect that it will be finalized and signed before the end of the year. This is a really momentous, exciting event. This report is the one in which the top military leader makes the project recommendation, as I just mentioned, to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. So this report will be reviewed by the Assistant Secretary of the Army, as well as the Office of Management and Budget, as I mentioned, and this report will set the stage for the city's consideration of the report and the next steps following that, leading into implementation. So the Corps team has done an amazing job taking this study to the finish line. They've often encountered a high level of effort in completing different milestones of the work, and they've identified a need for additional funding to close out this feasibility phase and to provide the technical support that's going to be crucial in these final stages of review, both at the Army Corps and the federal government and locally. Recently, $16,500 was authorized to contribute to the Corps to match the same amount that they had identified, which was crucial and timely to help that state and agency review be completed and the responses to it start to be written. Now the Corps has obtained authorization to reprogram up to $177,000 to the study. Because the city is a 50-50 cost-sharing partner, we must match the funds for them to be utilized. Therefore, it's recommended that the council authorize a contribution up to that amount to close out the feasibility phase of the study. However, the Corps has estimated that actually less than that of full authority will likely be required, only about $111,250. And that funding would be provided only on an as-needed basis in increments of about $50,000 at a time, with the return of any unused monies. So this funding would take the study, again, through the completion of feasibility phase. The funds are available in a city account specifically.
Uh-oh. Someone really needs you.
Maybe we have news.
Sorry, Michael. Let's pause for just a second there.
Yeah, sure. The Chief's report's been signed.
Is it the president saying you got the money?
That call goes directly to you, sir.
All right. I'll take it. All right.
All right, sorry. So, again, this funding, as I mentioned, would take the study through the completion of the feasibility phase. The funds are available in an account at the city specifically for this purpose and could be transferred upon authorization. So that concludes my report on that element of the study. I just want to thank again the Corps team for their hard work over 10 years to bring this study to the finish line, and now we're about to cross it. Carol, do you want to add anything?
Go Team River.
Go Team River.
And then if there's any follow-up questions, Ed could help me answer those for sure.
I was just reflecting as you're talking that 2006. So by the time these final reports are in, it will have been 10 years, which it's been a long time, but then again, it kind of hasn't, because it seems like it was yesterday that this all began. So what are some of the major high points over the last 10 years?
Wow. Carol.
Well, I think fundamentally, hi, it's Carol again. Fundamentally, I think what we have to understand is that the city and the Army Corps partnered together in the last century to create the LA River channelized flood control system in the name of single-purpose flood protection, and it was incredibly successful. It was an amazing feat of engineering that employed thousands of people. And then over the decades, we now have a new understanding of what we need to do in terms of reviving our river, reconnecting it to our landscape and to our people. And so it's really something that now the Army Corps of Engineers has the mission for ecosystem restoration. And the byline is you can't change the concrete in the river's channel unless the Army Corps says that you can. So we embarked on this partnership in 2007. They were hand in hand with us for the development of our LA River Revitalization Master Plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2007. And so this, not only are we at the point where the Army Corps says it's worth it to change the channel, but they're also going to invest in it with us and commit to actually doing it. So if you look at some of the key pieces of Alternative 20, which was the overwhelmingly supported project, they very much reflect the city's master plan. We're going to see restoration at the Verdugo Wash. We're going to see restoration at Taylor Yard. We're going to see restoration at Arroyo Seco and at the LA State Historic Park. So, and of course at the Piggyback Yard, which is unprecedented in the possibilities nationwide of doing this scale of urban ecosystem restoration. But it also shows that we're leveraging investments by the state of California in Rio de Los Angeles State Park and LA State Historic Park. The state spent over $100 million to acquire those parcels. And now we're finally going to connect them to the river. So I think this is a really exciting moment for all of us. We've learned a lot along the way about how we could do things better, but at the same time, we've achieved a lot, and it's a great moment for us to celebrate and to move forward. So that's would be my reflection over the last 10 years.
Yeah. And in terms of milestones within the study, it actually goes all the way back to 2003 when the reconnaissance phase started, in which the Corps, the federal government, basically determined there's an interest here, there's an opportunity here. And then 2006, when the feasibility phase kicked off officially, I believe it was before my time, but I believe it was about 2009. There was a series of community workshops and charrettes to really put heads together to figure out what measures are possible, what really makes sense, and then in 2012 and 13, the finalization of the alternatives, where we, all that was developed, the habitat analysis that was created, the cost estimates were boiled down with, with computer modeling to say this is what makes sense in terms of the best value, best bang for our buck. So then in 2013, the public review of the draft report, the hugely attended public meeting in October of that year. And then, since then, in responding to what the Corps heard, what we heard from the public and from agencies during that process, and finalizing this report, selecting Alternative 20 as the preferred and recommended plan moving forward, it's been, there have been momentous milestones every year or so. It's been a lot of substantial progress.
Well, terrific. We're looking forward to, checking this box and then taking a look at the next one, and the next one's a big one. In terms of the monies that we have helped with paying for the report itself, we saved money from the original estimate of about $210,000 or so. How did we do that? How do we? It was less costly than we initially thought.
Right. Yes. And Ed could probably speak to that best. But yes, you're correct in that originally we were expecting to ask for authority to provide up to $210,000, and since then the Corps has reduced the estimate of what would be needed moving forward.
Thank you, Mike. Ed Demesa, Chief of Planning, Corps of Engineers again. Sir, thank you for asking us to be here. I would like to add to your last question. For the Corps of Engineers, LA River is a paradigm-changing project for us nationally. It has challenged our policies. We have been given waivers which otherwise would have stopped the study a long time ago. It is our first large urban restoration project that actually is in the same footprint of a project that the Corps of Engineers built. So we're setting precedent. It's going to define the Corps of Engineers from here on, and it's been fun along the way. I recall the first meeting regarding LA River study with Councilman Reyes as a young study manager, and now I'm here reporting to you as the Chief of Planning. But I'm glad that we are at the end of our planning stage, and we definitely look forward to the more exciting implementation stage here pretty soon. Now on the cost, back to the cost, the initial estimate that we provided you was before the state of agency review was actually in place. So we have received letters as Mike indicated, we have about 30 or so, about 1,400 support letters for Alternative 13. But the ones that's going to require detailed responses and comments will be, those are the ones that we're working on right now. It is less than what we had anticipated, but there are some analysis and additional work that we have to do for that. And that reflects, the assessment of that reflects the new cost estimate that you have right now. You will note that we have quite a bit of contingency, and it's because this is the process where the policymakers look beyond what the Corps of Engineers have done, and we will be asked to provide information as the project goes through the review by OMB, by Congress, and everyone else that is the champion for this project.
And as far as the assist in funding, the transfer of funding from the city to the Army Corps to pay for the report itself, is this it? Are there any more reports? This was a bit of a surprise to us, quite frankly. Are there going to be any more surprises? Or is this the end game for the Army Corps, this general's report? Is that it? And then it's Congress, it's appropriations?
Yeah, yes, sir. So the task that we have laid out takes us to the authorization of this project. The next step that we will be preparing for is to define the scope of work for the pre-construction detailed design.
And will you, at that point, do you anticipate you'll need more funding from outside, such as the City of Los Angeles, to pay for the reports?
There will be a corresponding cost-sharing agreement for that stage of the project.
And have we anticipated that so that we don't get caught in the same boat as we are with the floodplain maps? So,
yes, sir. That's in our schedule. We have reported that as part of our continuing work. The Corps of Engineers do not have funding to start that process right now, but the work that we're doing right now, part of the cost that you are approving today is to provide some information that will set the stage for the next phase.
So, Ed, this is Carol Armstrong again. Please clarify. So we're finishing the feasibility phase. This is the last request of funding from the city in order to complete the study, which is the feasibility phase.
That's correct.
Okay. So yes, as cost-sharing partners, we move forward with implementation. We will be asking for more money because we will need to continue to contribute as the cost-sharing sponsor of the subsequent phases of the study, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
okay, we'll establish a timeline for that so that we're not caught flat-footed. Yeah.
That's correct. And we will be, once the chief's report is finished, and we will be packaging as the city the approval documentation to come before council, which will itemize all of those next steps in the study, the anticipated costs associated with those, and what our contribution will be.
Perfect. That helps. Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? No? What I'm going to do then is, let's see. All right. We have no additional public comment cards on this. What I'd like to do is approve the BOE report. As is. With no objections, it is approved. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank you. Which brings us to number 4.
Item number 4, Department of Cultural Affairs report relative to the Arts Activation Fund and its program guidelines.
Oh, thank you. And we'll hear the item, and then we'll take some comment cards right after.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Danielle Brazell. I'm the General Manager of the Department of Cultural Affairs. And today we have 2 items before you, and what I'm hoping to do is just to set the table, because even though they're 2 separate items, they actually are part of a larger strategy. I also want to take a moment to thank this committee for your due diligence, and I also want to acknowledge and thank the staff of the Department of Cultural Affairs. I'm joined at the table today with our Director of Grants, Mr. Joe Smoke. And we have several members also in the audience from our public art team and our development staff, and our new Assistant General Manager, Daniel Tarika. So I'm well supported in case there's questions you guys throw at me that I don't have the answer for. As DCA transforms into a progressive 21st century civic arts agency, I want to make sure that we start most of our conversations, if not all of our conversations, with our core values, because everything that we do needs to be within the lens of access, equity, excellence, and efficiency. And when I talk about access, I'm talking about access to providing arts, culture, and creative programming in neighborhoods and communities throughout Los Angeles. I want to talk about equity to make sure that our process is fair, equitable, and based on a set of criteria. I want to talk about excellence, that we have standards of excellence, peer panel reviews, and that are based also in national best practices. And I want to talk about efficiency. We offer the best customer service, but what I'm learning also around efficiency is that it takes a little bit of time because we are a public agency. And our goal is to deliver these services in alignment with Mayor Garcetti's Back to Basic Priority Outcomes to create a livable, sustainable city that's prosperous and well-run. And I believe that we're able to do this because art, culture, creativity is both a destination and a vehicle. So I've talked about this a lot, because you can go to a museum or you can go to a place and you can experience art and culture like a theater and whatnot. But it's also a vehicle that it can be used to address some of our city's most pressing problems. And the items that we have before you today is really very much within the realm of art as a vehicle to address some of those challenges, generating economic activity through jobs and tourism, increasing social cohesion through things like festivals and creative placemaking, and civic engagement through volunteerism. We also believe in music and sound as a way to...
I get it.
I believe in muting.
This is like interactive art going on here.
So I wanted to kind of set the table because we have two items before you. One is the Arts Activation Fund, and this is something that we put into last year's budget as a joint request with Great Streets. But what we've found within the Department of Cultural Affairs is that we don't really have an in fiscal year mechanism to fund really interesting projects that animate public space in our city. And we also know that arts and culture is a constantly evolving strategy, and how do we utilize our existing divisions to inform ways in which we can animate public space. And so we came up with the Arts Activation Fund. We actually requested $500,000 in our budget, 15-16 budget, and we received $200,000, which we're trying to hone in to demonstrate the proof of concept. We have developed a set of guidelines, which Joe Smoke has helped us on. The idea is that we can actually review proposals on an ongoing basis, have it kind of be a staff level, intra-division type of scoring mechanism, and then route it up to our commission and have the folks that are applying to this fund come to the commission to present, and then move these out the door within a couple months. Now, the efficiency component of our value system within a public system is challenging, especially as it relates to contracting. You need to be in BAVN, you need to have a demonstrated 501c3, you need to have 4 or 5 years of programming under your belt. And what we're also seeing is that becomes a huge barrier for some organizations and small groups to be able to access our funding. We also believe that arts and culture should be authentic to a community, that we should create opportunities for small community groups that may not be a total formalized 501c3 to be able to have city support, because we know what they're providing when they're able to demonstrate some cultural programming, that it actually increases the vitality of our neighborhoods. So really the Arts Activation Fund is designed specifically to do that and hopefully to bring in new grantees through our existing pipeline. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions at the moment.
Sure. And Joe, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm prepared to go over the guidelines if you have questions about the program and how we've arranged it.
One comment I have is that I purposely wanted to not tie it 100% into Great Streets, specifically as it applies to Council District 13. Hollywood Boulevard is the Great Streets. So many resources get poured into Hollywood Boulevard all the time. They can privately fund things on Hollywood Boulevard, but we have other locations in the district, historic Filipino town, further down the boulevard that isn't part of the Great Street in Little Armenia, cultural identity, which is so important in the 13th. And so I love the fact that we can now do these demonstration art projects in other parts that aren't necessarily tied to the Great Streets program, but they achieve the same objective anyway, and that is artistic expression, authentically reflecting a community. It's perfect.
Great.
So that's good stuff. I have a question in terms of, have we named the incubator agency? It's as identified in the letter?
It's not identified in the letter. We have done our due diligence and looked around Los Angeles for a business that could take this $200,000, could provide fast payments to community vendors, has a history of incubating new businesses that are being seeded for the first time, either whether they are going to become for-profit or non-for-profit, or simply be a project that exists for the duration of a certain work and then twilights. And we've come back with 2 agencies that are eligible and one that's much preferred. It's called Community Partners. It's an organization that's already in our grant portfolio. They've been working with us for more than 10 years, seeding and working as an umbrella organization for small arts projects that are in their official business incubator. They are located at the California Endowment, and they fit all 5 criteria that we would need as a community partner for this program.
Okay, and the money, it's a small pot of money, $200,000, but how much of that do you anticipate would be consumed by administrative?
The fees.
Yeah. I think in this first year, considering that we have only half a year left, we're going to need to move rather rapidly, that we would work with them to be about 15% of the money. We need them to do all the bookkeeping for these 8 to 10 small projects. We need them to provide a rider on their insurance so that each project has $1 million liability policy. We'd also like them to provide a consultant, a mentor to each project. We're not in a position as a staff to get out and see all these projects and to watch them day to day or to even attend all of them. And so it would be good if the agent that is our partner takes responsibility to not only have these dialogues with the community partners, but to actually show up and report on what was created. So we're asking them to do a lot, and we feel like that's a reasonable amount. They have a standard flat fee of 9% to receive a grant from a private agency and 12% from a government agency. So we're looking at that 12 to 15% range as an equitable way to go with this.
Okay, that's reasonable. And to your point, Ms. Brazella, in terms of startup arts organizations that maybe don't have a 501c3 yet, could they provide the fiduciary for that, or identify someone who could, and that way they
precisely
could partner?
The role. And because the incubator organization is specifically designed to help move organizations, or in some cases not, but because they can handle the kind of backbone, back office component, it takes the onus off the kind of nascent group, and it allows them to, to really focus on the artistic craft and not as much of the business of running a nonprofit. So in some cases, we have worked with community partners and our grantees. They actually choose not to create a 501c3.
Okay, all right. And do you kind of mentioned this earlier, but do you imagine about one in each council district more or less? One project?
I would say that the goal is that we're very cognizant of the concept of cultural equity within the city of Los Angeles. And part of the Arts Activation Fund, let me back up. We talk about cultural equity from the lens of the distribution of resources, but also the value that is placed on cultural expression throughout our city. We are deeply interested in making sure that we develop a strong value system that is reflective of the population of the city of Los Angeles, that is incredibly diverse, that is incredibly unique, and that there are more people living outside of their homelands than anywhere else in the world. So within the cultural crossroads, we're very interested in that. From the cultural equity point of view of the distribution of resources, some communities have lower cultural infrastructure than others. And so our grant dollar doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have the same ability to move into some communities as it does others. We believe the Arts Activation Fund is a low cultural infrastructure type of requirement, and we'll be able to get into communities where we don't necessarily already have grantees, which is why we're designing the program the way it is.
Great. Thank you. Colleagues. Mr. Price.
This is an exciting program, and I applaud your efforts in really making sure that we get resources distributed around the city in ways that we haven't before. So who could apply for this activation grant? I mean, do you have to be a nonprofit? Can you just be a block club? Can you be two people coming together?
Yes.
Literally, what's the...
You don't have to be a nonprofit. You can be a couple of creative artists that perhaps are living in your district and they want to do some sort of, let's say, open jazz night along Central Avenue and invite people to come out and jam in a public space along Central Avenue, for example. This is specifically what it's designed for. The application has been streamlined. It's 1.5 pages currently. And so that's the idea. What it's not for is for current grantees. Because we want to be mindful that we don't want folks kind of double dipping, but when we want to kind of sprinkle and spread and build more people into the pipeline.
Right. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. And let us know who should have this, because we'll need to partner with council offices in getting the word out about this.
All right. Thanks.
That's great. Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. Mr. Brazil, this is great, and you continue to show great leadership in this area, and we recognize that. So thank you for keeping that up. And I like the fact that you're talking about trying to create a diverse, not only culturally but geographically. And I know that's a challenge. You can't, even if you take the 30% off the top, $170,000. That only gets you 11 districts if you wanted to do it at $15,000 a pop. Although I guess they can be a lot smaller, right?
It's up to 15.
Up to 15. Okay, so you can strive to have it in every district. And we always in the far-flung valley worry that, especially, love the endowment, but a lot of resources get centralized, and it's hard to get way out to the further reaches of this large city of ours. So it's great that you're focused on that. And any way that we can help, I wanted to put that out there, all of us as council members with the outreach.
Thank you.
Let us know if there's specific things now that you want to tell us, because I could see doing all sorts of things as a council member to encourage local artists to apply for this. I do something in my office. We put up local artists' work. But this is a great way that a council office could provide the outreach. Are there things that you would want us to do to help you with this?
I would say absolutely. Making sure that we get you and your communications team the social media outreach kit, and making sure that we have plug-and-play information that goes into each one of your newsletters, and we can sync up the timing of when those newsletters go out. Look, it is very important. We need mechanisms to reach into communities that don't have a high number of nonprofit arts organizations, and we need to kind of level the playing field, so we're going to rely on working with your offices on doing that.
Great. Another question I had about this is great because you get rid of some of the barriers that are out there for folks with the having to get these big grants. But another barrier that's out there for folks is getting the city permits. And if you're going to do that jazz festival on Central Avenue, which sounds like a great idea for that person who may not be that, that artist who may not be that astute with the city world is going to have to go pull a permit and do a bunch of things like that. Is there anything in this grant process that, aside from streamlining your process, that helps someone walk through the Byzantine world of city permits?
We have language in here that at the end that says that the acceptance into the fund does not mean that the project is waived for other city permit fees. And so indeed, upon acceptance, it will be partly our role to direct them to these other places where they need to fulfill these other requirements. We hope we're providing them with the resources so that they can spend the money and do those things if they are at a cost. We certainly have the expertise as the staff working with many departments that we can move people along. But this is a good question because for the future, this project may beget a whole streamlined efficiency in other departments where we do a sort of quick funding and a quick permitting process for things that are being seeded and started up for the first time, because we want to be a city that embraces innovative ideas. So let us pilot the program and let's see how it goes. And if we do in fact find that our applicants who are accepted are having problems with permitting, then we'll come back to you and we'll report on how we propose to streamline those things with other departments.
So part of the funds could be used to give back to the city for permitting. I mean,
Precisely.
I'd rather have them spend on paint, music, and all that stuff, but
Indeed, but if they do propose a mural, we have a mural permitting process. We want them to go through these other processes, and if there are fees associated with those things, this fund will help them to overcome that barrier at least. So we agree that the best case scenario is that we're providing artists with seasonal employment or new kinds of employment. But above and beyond that, we're also teaching them that there is some cost to do business in the city of Los Angeles, and they need to be both aware of that and pay for those services.
thank you.
I would add, this is something that's very top of mind. The mayor has charged us with increasing festivals in Los Angeles. This is one of the challenges that we as a city have, in that some of our fees have become so prohibitive that it has chased many of our festivals outside to neighboring cities. So it's something from a legislative process that we're actually looking quite diligently on to find out what are some of the barriers to doing this type of business in the city, and how can we make it easier for nonprofit festival producers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've always felt that we could do so much more without closing streets.
Right.
We can do so much more. That's just our way with an opinion.
And these are small, these are small incubator activation type things.
Yeah.
So I do.
Sidewalk
I'm
things,
really looking at it from
right-of-way
a
things.
sidewalk kind of perspective, or even kind of on the side street where it may not be as disruptive. So we're trying to kind of see what we can do to innovate on this and get this off the ground so we can kind of get some new learning in.
Terrific.
And these applicants will be coming to you for letters of recommendation. So if indeed they do propose something that you think is out of scale with your great street or not in the right place, that's going to create some business reflection that's not good, or that there's going to be something that's going to be the community will fight against, we would rely on you to help them hone their project in the right way so that it is in fact both feasible and community friendly, because you know the communities better
Right.
than some of the artists who live there.
And I imagine all of the city council members will feel that it's in our best interest to help guide the selected program through as well. Thank you. Great. Mr. Rue.
Just a quick comment. I just want to echo my colleagues and thank you for everything that you're doing. And we've been working closely with your office on many projects, and we look forward to working with you on this as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we have a couple of comments, and that is from Mr. Gil Smith and Ms. Naila Arslanian. Come on up, both of you. Yeah.
You guys going to?
Yeah, I think we're good. Ms. Brazil and Mr. Smoke, I think we're
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'll let you guys take.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, committee members. Former Senator Price, we met at a theater a number of years ago before he became council member, and Mr. Farrell. And Mr. Bloomfield, we've never met, but I'm chair of the Ricardo Montalban Foundation, owner and operator of the Ricardo Montalban Theater, better known as the Montalban on Vine Street. I'm also a trustee on the Hollywood Arts Council, and Nyla Arcelinian brought this meeting to my attention, and I certainly want to become more active with the process of the promotion of the arts. I primarily have been doing this in my own backyard. As an example, we have the University of Guadalajara coming in for 2 days this week for a play called Hotel Good Luck, and then we have the new Hollywood Chamber Orchestra performing on Friday night, which is a classical music initiative, which is the first in Hollywood in quite a long time, and the Brazilian Film Festival on Saturday. So that's just this week. I was very concerned, and Daniel Brazil made a very, very impassioned speech about the fact that art being described not only as physical art, but also music, performing arts, and other areas within the community that we have as the entertainment capital of the world, and we have to develop those new talents. So I think that's well underway, and my concerns about that definition is calling them an outline versus a guideline right now as we go down through the process. I know that Councilmember O'Farrell spoke at a meeting recently about actors and the challenges that the 99-seat theaters have. And we have a very important theater district, Theater Row. And many of those 99-seat theaters are going to be challenged with production dollars. And that $15,000 matching to the $32,000 that it's going to cost to put on 99-seat theaters productions is going to be an extremely important factor moving forward, because I don't believe equity is going to change its direction in the support of that process here in Los Angeles. That is, I'm the largest intimate theater in Hollywood, and we need to have new playwrights. We need to stimulate the actors, the producers, and the directors with funding, and this, I think, would be one of those ways through the Cultural Arts Center.
Thank you so much, Gil. And Gil, thank you also. Ricardo Montalban has such creative programming, the wonderful things you've done there for years and years and years now. You're to be commended for, bringing that institution to life and for doing such a great job there. So thanks for coming and speaking today.
Thank you.
And now to another all-star here, Nyla Arcelinian.
Good afternoon. It's just really great. What a super committee you have. And Councilmember Rue, Councilmember Price, of course, you. And like Gil, I introduced myself. My name is Nyla Arcelinian. I am president emeritus after being president of the Hollywood Arts Council for 33 years. I have stepped down. We have a new chairman of the board. We have an executive director. I have stepped down, but I have not stepped out. And when I saw this item coming up on your agenda today, felt that it was important that we come and we say hello and become really active in the process. I'm delighted to hear about this proposal that's being put forward by our Cultural Affairs Department, and I do have some concerns about it. One is, although I think that it's great that we're looking at giving these grants of $15,000 to incubate artists and arts organizations, I think it is important that they do have some kind of skin in the game. Not necessarily matching funds, which is something that we have to, who are fortunate enough to have funding from the City of Los Angeles, we have to have a one-by-one match. But maybe something, maybe it be an in-kind, maybe it be a partnership with an entity, a business, if it's, as she noted, a jazz concert maybe down on Central Avenue, that there's a partnership put together that ties the artist into the community. And I also see, and we see this somewhat in in Hollywood. I don't know if it's true, sort of in and out, I think, throughout the city, but noticing that the approval and coordination come through our neighborhood council. Unfortunately, in Hollywood, we have as one of our neighborhood councils sort of in and out of dysfunctionality. And so to look at what established organizations there might be within a community to partner with, such as the Hollywood Arts Council, who has been active for 37 years in our community, familiar with artists, familiar with some of the processes, and that we could and we will put forward our partnership with Cultural Affairs to see how we can interface to assist in any way to help facilitate this fine program. So thank you so very much. Good seeing you all.
Thank you so
nice
much.
meeting you too.
Thank you so much, Nyla. And if anyone hasn't been to the Charlie Awards put on by the Hollywood Arts Council, it is the hottest ticket in town. It's coming up, I know.
And I'm going to leave a few of these magazines. The Arts Council partners with Discover Hollywood, and we maintain a day-by-day calendar of arts events in the Hollywood area, probably the best calendar in Los Angeles, I will say.
Thank you.
So thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Seeing as this is the first of many creative, innovative arts programs that will be coming out from the Department of Cultural Affairs, I suggest that we approve the Arts Activation Fund guidelines. Without objection. Seeing as there's no objection, that item is approved. And now we're going to talk about Promise Zone arts grants. Ms. Brazel.
Item number 5, Department of Cultural Affairs report relative to the grant application to the National Endowment for the Arts for the Promise Zone Arts Program.
Thank you. Andrew Kasdan, perhaps the best grant writer in the city of Los Angeles, is also multi-talented, and he's going to be operating our PowerPoint presentation today. We talked a little bit on the previous agenda item around the lack of cultural infrastructure in certain communities in the city of Los Angeles, and the inability of really our city to be able to use the great strength that we have from cultural organizations or even social service organizations that are steeped within a cultural community tradition to be a partner in achieving some of our larger goals. This was one of the first projects that I was able to put forward for the National Endowment for the Arts through a program called the Our Town program. And we received actually the largest award available on that program, $200,000. Our Town is a program designed to support creative placemaking projects that help transform communities into lively, beautiful, and resilient places with arts at their core. And just to kind of frame what creative placemaking is when artists, arts organizations, and community development practitioners deliberately integrate arts and culture into community revitalization work, placing arts at the table with land use, transportation, economic development, education, housing, infrastructure, and public safety strategies. I do not overpromise. I promise you, I do not overpromise. I hope I don't overpromise. So we partnered with the Mayor's Promise Zone office within the Mayor's Office of Economic Development to apply for the grant. And we have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'd love to check on time because I want to be mindful.
How much time you have?
Well, yeah, how much time?
How much time had you planned out?
Well, I'm a theater artist, council member, so I could take 3, I could take 5 minutes, I can take 10 minutes.
Let's give it up to 10.
Great,
Yeah.
fantastic, I love it. Okay, wonderful. So here's our PowerPoint presentation. The Promise Zone includes parts of council districts, or 4 council districts, CD1, CD4, CD10, and CD13. And events will be held in each of these council districts. The Our Town grants require a partnership between the city and nonprofit service providers. And that's a very important point because while it's a citywide initiative, the NEA recognizes that you need to have strong and engaged nonprofit partners who are able to perform the actual work. Our partners for this project include the Alliance for California Traditional Art, the acronym is ACTA, and LA Commons. These organizations were selected through a process to ensure a competitive grant application. And we examined existing DCA pool of grantees, looking at which entities have shown capacity to complete cultural programs of relative nature. We confirmed with the California Arts Council, which is the state agency responsible to increase public access to the arts and arts education. We researched which nonprofit entities in Los Angeles City have been awarded NEA funds previously and which have been noted for exceptional work for previous Art Town awards. ACTA was selected due to its capacity as the official partner of the California Arts Council, a state government department. They further have unique expertise in the field of traditional arts, which this grant supports. LA Commons was selected due to its proven capacity to execute previous successful Art Town programs. They work with local residents to create community-based art projects and connect visitors to LA's cultural treasures. Youth Policy Institute is the lead partner with the Mayor's Promisone Office, will also assist pro bono. We'll work with staff and students to provide a youth education component to the Promisone. So at the core, the Promisone Project Initiative is really rooted in, one is an asset mapping of the people, the places where cultural activity take place, and the way in which they engage their programs. I mean, as we know, the Promisone is perhaps one of the most diverse places in the city of Los Angeles. And we believe that the goals of the Promisone, improved educational opportunities, economic development, neighborhood safety, and livability, that arts and culture directly contribute to that. So we have East Hollywood, Hollywood, Koreatown. I want to go through this part kind of quickly. Pico Union, Westlake, and then the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, one of our flagship campuses, is located right at the edge of the Promisone. Our two partners, I think, are the most qualified to perform this work. The Alliance of California Traditional Arts have done a similar project in Boyle Heights with the California Endowment, and to great work. They've also worked throughout the Central Valley and Southern California to do similar types of projects. LA Commons, I think, is also another critical organization. Several years ago, they also worked with the Department of Cultural Affairs to do a preliminary cultural asset map. But what they do and what they're extraordinary at is developing opportunities for cultural exchange activities and events situated around authentic culture, food, traditions. You know, when we talk about art, that's a very Western European frame, but in many indigenous communities, there is no word for art. It is integrated into the very fabric of an identity, and so these two organizations are really steeped in understanding the cultural traditions and practices that we need to better understand so that we can develop systems like the Arts Activation Fund to create more opportunities for those organizations and people. YPI, as we know, offers after-school and summer enrichment programs at underperforming schools throughout the Promisone and Promise neighborhoods. And so this is a critical component and player in this initiative because it will add youth educational and workforce development opportunities for this event, for this program. So as we talked about, these are the goals: to improve educational opportunities, to foster good jobs and healthy businesses, to make our communities safe, and promote more livable communities. The working groups that the Promise Zone have already developed, many of which are also engaged in arts and cultural activities, but you can see some of them here, and we're integrating our work directly with these organizations. The phases are large. We're currently in phase 1, and this is orientation and planning. Next to phase 2 will be community introduction through 8 community sharing events. The real idea and the strategy in which we're using for this is that we're using art and culture and community sharing as part of the strategy. And once nothing gathers people better than some sort of arts and cultural event. I mean, that's what creates social cohesion and gets neighbors to talk with each other. And it creates an opportunity for our other non-arts, our social service organizations, to actually reach those very people that we want to build into. And so go back to the phasing. Oh, I see. You're drilling down into the phases. Okay. Yeah, let's go into the phases. So the other component is that the creation of the PZ Arts Task Force. There's already an existing task force for the Promise Zone, but for several of those organizations, we'd want to actually pull from what the existing task force structure is, to pull from participants to lead the next phase of the task force, which is, the survey, the creation of the survey, identifying what is a cultural treasure, and then professional folklorists will do the ethnographic, researchers to oversee the local teams to assist in obtaining the cultural treasures. This becomes a very sensitive type of work. When the city comes in and says, hi, we want to map your cultural treasures, we need to do it in a way that's very thoughtful, that isn't fear-based, but that actually kind of highlights, supports, and builds a value system around the work. And then the next phase, which I think is very important and has tremendous opportunities, is documentation. And the documentation creates another component of the value system, and we see the documentation component as they develop short videos and digital stories. Perhaps some of the ideas is that we can integrate that into, let's say, dash buses or a public transportation system as a way to kind of promote localized and hyper-local cultural tourism. And so that's students enrolled in the Youth Policy Institute and after-school summer programs will learn from and assist professional folklorists in how to do that work. So that's also part of the kind of workforce development training, where you're actually using existing human resources to build the fabric of this story. Next slide. And then, there's the database, because we want to be able to loop back and find ways of serving various cultural treasures, highlighting and again, creating that value system. Go ahead, next slide. So neighborhood sharing events, everything is going to kind of culminate back into these neighborhood sharing events, which in many ways look like small little festivals. So you might be able to see kind of a theme here is how you use arts and culture as that vehicle, as the social cohesion, as the way to kind of connect residents with services, and also simultaneously learn how to provide services. And then we do kind of program evaluation, evaluating the first 8 phases, articulating the role that cultural vitality plays in advancing livability. This is very important because we think it's a model that can be used in other communities. This is a standard of best practices, and it's something that we want to be able to do in other communities, especially in communities that have traditionally low cultural infrastructure. Then the next phase, which we'll have to reapply, is also looking at doing a mini grants program. Now, it's quite possible that the Arts Activation Fund can be what we're considering as a mini grants program. But you might be able to see that this is actually a structured, creative placemaking, and some would argue creative placekeeping, because we want to mitigate displacement due to gentrification. And so it could be really seen as a placekeeping point of view initiative that we use arts and culture as a way to really stabilize and highlight the uniqueness of Los Angeles's diverse neighborhoods. And we're so excited about it, and we hope you are too. Is that the end of the presentation? I hope so, because I thought that. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. So as part of the whole Promise Zone designation, the general idea and goal is to more easily access federal funds because of the designation, right? So is that in keeping with the funding, the grant funding that you're...
Indeed, it's a collective impact strategy. And the idea is that if you use a collective impact strategy where you bring health and human services, multi-departments together around a table to address systemic issues around poverty, education, et cetera, that you're actually going to be able to move the needle. And what happens, of course, if we're not strategic and coordinated about it, you end up throwing a whole bunch of money towards something and you don't end up making systemic change. And so while this is an incredibly ambitious and large-scale project, we believe having arts at the table of a community development and citywide effort is something that is important, and obviously the federal government thought so too, which is why we got the highest score.
Great, okay. And so that door will be open. The designation came out, it'll be 2 years ago in January.
Right.
So we have 8 more years of the Promise Zone designation. So those same doors will be open for the next several years.
Correct.
Which increases the odds of getting more such grants.
Right.
And so you already kind of talked about a longer-term strategy with another bite at the apple. So that's good. And this first round can inform the next and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And I gather from your presentation that your working relationship with YPI is really strong.
Indeed.
And so that's a good point. I think one of the questions that might come up from my colleagues here, understandably, and other colleagues on the City Council, in terms of how hard and fast is the Promise Zone boundary, in terms of, especially if it's cultural expression and such, art doesn't fit within boundaries. It's boundless, right? So what do you make of that, and what do you see as the opportunities there?
Well, indeed, culture is incredibly fluid. And I would say that the Department of Cultural Affairs needs to identify key strategies to develop cultural infrastructure where there is very little in communities. And this is one way in which we can do this. And so while there's these kind of hard geographical boundaries, in many ways those boundaries are incredibly arbitrary. We know that organizations may be situated within a geographical boundary, but may serve communities throughout the city of Los Angeles. So we're less interested in that kind of hard and fast, but rather really kind of using the adaptive leadership model of how do you use arts as the strategy, and how do you demonstrate a strong framework that can be used and tailored in other communities.
I mean, clearly there'll be a cross-benefit to having an event or something within a Promise Zone boundary.
Right.
There will be a benefit across a geographic area that isn't just confined to those boundaries.
Right. I mean, I would use the example of my friend's place, and I would also use the example of a place called Home. So we have my friend's place is a homeless drop-in shelter in East Hollywood that falls actually one block outside or, maybe even across the street from the Promise Zone designation. We know that those clients, if they have access to arts and culture, and our Friends Place actually has a wonderful arts program, that access to arts and culture provides their clients with greater stability to accept services. When clients accept services, the success rate goes up and more homeless kids get off the streets.
So you don't see a barrier to establishing that nexus
No.
for the
No,
to honor the definition of the grant? Yeah.
because the homeless population is traversing everyone's district. And so we actually want to use the tools appropriately.
Okay, great. Colleagues, Mr. Blumenfield.
Well, just to kind of follow up on that point, and, it's a great program, very excited about it. The geographic boundaries are difficult from when you look at the map, and you certainly look where my district is about as far away from the Promise Zone as you can get. So is there any hope for folks who are in the West Valley or in the Valley in general? More than almost half the city is in the Valley and is not touched by the zone. Or will there be any attempts in the future, if we get a lot of great programs here, to skew some other funding a little bit more toward the Valley?
Yes. Indeed, and I would say that this is a planning effort, and I think that we need to, it's both a planning framework and a planning strategy, and I think that what we need to do with the Department of Cultural Affairs is look at, especially in communities that don't have a strong cultural infrastructure, places, activities, people where arts and culture, that are fueled by arts and culture, that we can actually take this framework and tailor it towards, communities in the Valley, right? Or communities in South LA. This is the ongoing challenge, is that we have one shot at this Our Town grant per year, and we have to, the federal government will provide funding when something that's reasonable, right? And so we have to kind of think about what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and how do we then use those tools to solve other similar problems in the city of Los Angeles. And that would be my approach to that.
Great. No, colleagues? All right. Well, thank you so much. This is very exciting, and look forward to seeing how this benefits, and I'm certain that it will. Art and culture really bring things to life, and I'm a firm believer, as you know, and it's a wonderful fit for these extremely disadvantaged neighborhoods. So I'm very excited to see this.
Thank you, and thank you all for your support and your commitment to ensuring that the Department of Cultural Affairs is able to provide services at a level commensurate with the size of our city, which is incredibly large, and we are so deeply committed to doing that, and we appreciate your partnership in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so without objection, we will move the DCA report forward.
Thank you.
You bet. And seeing as there's no objection, this report is adopted. And are there any other remaining agenda items?
Thank you so much.
There are no other.
Thank you so much. Well, that will do it. Seeing as there are no other comment cards, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.